Today we are on Lesson 11, Chapter 11, which is using CSS to do more with list, text, and navigation. Today in Lesson 11, we're going to talk about how the CSS box model affects list. We're going to talk about how to customize the list item indicator. We're going to talk about how to use list items and CSS to create an image map. We're going to talk about how navigation lists differ from regular lists. We're going to talk about how to create vertical navigation with CSS and how to create horizontal navigation with CSS. This chapter is an important chapter in that it takes what we learned in HTML in that structure, and just by creating a simple unordered or ordered list, we can use some CSS to turn that list into a navigation menu, which is similar to what you see on a lot of sites, whether it be horizontal navigation menu up top or vertical navigation menu on the left. Usually they're just a list of links, which is what a navigation is. It's just a list of links, and they either go to another page on the website, another area on the website, or a completely external website. And those are usually just an unordered list and styled so that the bullet doesn't show up, and styled in the way that they show up next to each other or on top of each other with different backgrounds and different colors and different fonts. And we're going to talk about how to do that in this lesson. Your book goes through and gives you a little bit of an HTML list refresher and goes over the syntax for making an ordered list and an unordered list. And then it talks about how the CSS box model, which we talked about in previous lessons, affects those lists. The chapter also goes over image maps, which I think are good to look at. I don't use them that much in my day-to-day programming. So coming up next, I'm going to share my screen with you and go over the three most important examples that I think would be good takeaways of this chapter, which is styling your list, creating a horizontal navigation with CSS, and creating a vertical navigation with CSS. This is an example of an ordered list and an unordered list. And this is what we learned so far. In this chapter, we talk about styling list and making horizontal and vertical navigations out of a list. So you see the code here on the left. OL tag for the ordered list and the UL tag for the unordered list, and this is how it renders in the browser. Notice, just by adding a little styling, we can get that list to look like this. So let's take a look at what we did. For our ordered list, we added a background color, we added some padding, we added a border, and we made the width. For our unordered list, I'll take it here so you can see. Same thing. We added some padding, added a border. This one's 300 pixels, which is why it shows up a little wider. Now all the list items in the ordered list have this background color here and a 5 pixel padding. All the list items in the unordered list have a different background color, and notice there's no padding, which is why it seems a little tighter here as opposed to up here. And every list item has this blue border color, which is what we see here and here. A couple other things we learned is the list style type none. So if I do this in the ordered list and save it, it removes those numbers. Another thing we learned was list style position inside. So if I do that in the unordered list and save it, notice that the bullets, instead of on the outside, they'll go on the inside, because it is by default on the outside. That's how it is default. So if you actually put inside, that's what makes it show up inside here. So by styling lists, we can remove the bullets or numbers, or we can move the bullets or numbers on the inside of that area. We can add padding and margins around, and we can set the width of how wide we want. And we can also add a border around the whole thing and a border around each list item. Now, that looks a lot better than just having a list with no styling, which is what we learned in just HTML. So just by adding a little bit of styling, we see what we can do here with an ordered and unordered list. Next we have is vertical navigation. So I did the same thing here. I commented out the styling so you can just see what we have just in HTML. This is an ordinary unordered list, and it's another nested unordered list in between. So if we look at the HTML here, so if we look at our unordered list, we have our tag which begins here and ends here. This is the whole unordered list. Each of these is a list item, mission, history, executive team, and then there's another nested unordered list in between, which is right here, which is what shows up inside here with these open bullets. All these are links. This is just a placeholder for when you actually have a link to that page. This is just an example, so it's not linking to any page right now. And then notice this whole list here, if I collapse this, this whole unordered list is in between two nav tags. By placing that whole list in between nav tags, you're able to style it and grab those tags in the CSS. So let me show you what basic, this is HTML. Let me uncomment this out so we can see what it looks like after we style. So that takes that unordered list and add some styling here. And notice when we hover over, now navigation is just a list of links and we're styling it vertically. So let's take a look at what we need to do that. So the body, I gave it a 12-point font. This is just some of that styling we learned early in CSS. Now notice those nav tags that had everything inside them of the unordered list. Set that width, which is that width we're seeing here. Floating it to the left, which is why the text is showing up over here. We add a top margin and a right margin. The section, which is everything here, this text, that's also floating to the left, so that's going to come up next to this. Text decoration none, which means it's not going to be that blue link with the underline. For all the links inside this nav, it's not going to have that default underline blue. Every unordered list in the nav tag, list style none, which means it gets rid of that bullet or numbers if it's an unordered list or ordered list. So in this case, it's all the unordered lists will not have those bullets. We set a margin here and no padding. Now every list item that's in the unordered list that's in the navigation is going to have that border bottom, which is the bottom that we see here, here, and here, 1 pixel solid, and we set that color. This is where the styling comes in place when I hover over or click it. So it's saying if it's a link and it's also either or, so all links and all visited links that are list items in the unordered list in the navigation will have this font size, font weight bold, display block. Here's the padding, and this is that color blue that we see for the background, and this is the color we see for the text. Then when we hover over, or if it's active, that's when we see it changes the text to green and the background color to a lighter blue. Now for here, we're styling the unordered list that's nested in the unordered list in the nav. And we're getting rid of that bottom border. So if it's an unordered list inside an unordered list, it doesn't have that bottom border, which is like this nested one down here. That's why these ones, CEO, CFO, manager, don't have that underline border on the bottom. And then these are also styled the same way for the unordered list, the nested one in the unordered list, styled the same way when we hover over them or click them. So this pretty much is just a repeat hover active link visited of this hover active link visited. We just have to do that again for this mini nested list inside. And that's how you style a vertical navigation. And thirdly, we have the horizontal navigation. So I did the same thing. I commented out the styling. So right now, a basic unordered list with no styling of links just shows up like this. And we added a logo or image here. I just want to note that all of these examples are similar to the ones in your book, only just I changed the styling around a little bit and some of the content. I want to show you that you can kind of do the same thing and apply it and make it your own. So let's uncomment all this styling out. So remember, it's just the same. It's an unordered list in a nav. We already know how to do all this in HTML. Just this unordered list in the nav with all the list items, what shows up like this, which we know how. And then by styling it a little bit, I'm going to save that and reload it. It can turn it into this, horizontal navigation. Now the styling colors are the same, backgrounds are the same. The same thing happens when I hover over it or click. So you notice some of that's going to be the same, but just how we get it to be horizontal is different. So let's take a look at this styling code. Same font styling for the body. We set the header width to auto. The logo is that image. We're floating it to the left, which is why it's showing up over here. This navigation also floating to the left, which is going to float to the left up against here, minus any margins we have, which is this 30 pixels margins. We set the width to 400 pixels, which is this width right here. Background color, and then the border around the whole thing is that pink color. So we'll look at the unordered list inside the navigation. List style none, so we got rid of the bullets, and display inline, which is why it's displaying like this. This is that key. Notice how in the vertical one, we floated it left. We did text decoration none, and we did display block. So now we have our list items inside that unordered list. Display inline again, set the line height. And when it's a link or visited, the same type of thing applies here. We add some padding, add the color, and then if it's hovered over or active, we're changing it a little bit. It turns to a lighter blue, and it changes the color of the text to a green instead of pink when we're hovered over. This section is this text right here, set to auto width, floated to the left, and clear left. So this is how you use CSS to style a navigation horizontally. Go through this code again so you can see it. Here's the navigation, the unordered list in the navigation, every list item in there, and then here's your styling for the links, what happens with this whole background color when you hover over. And that is how you use a horizontal navigation, vertical navigation, and list with CSS. Okay, so I hope those examples help. I know for me, I just like to actually do it and program it and code it myself. That really helps me keep it in my mind when I actually try it and then change it up a little bit. So coming up next, we have our Lesson 11 PowerPoint presentation, so stay tuned.